Episode 1 of Sold Out on You begins with an introduction to HIT, a famous home shopping company getting ready to broadcast their next segment. Unfortunately, their host, Dam Ye-jin, is missing. The studio managers scramble on set and things are going badly when Ye-jin suddenly makes a triumphant appearance on screen. She's currently hanging by the side of one of the tallest buildings in the city, all to prove that the cleaning gloves they are selling are of top-notch quality. The stunt works and the company sells out all of its gloves. Meanwhile, in the small village of Dukpung, a man named Matthew Lee is unable to go about his day because of all the senior citizens around him asking him for his help. He helps adjust the TV antenna for the senior centre and then gives a group of the elders a lift on his tractor. On the way, they describe how Matthew has a prickly personality but always helps them out, whether it's chopping firewood or removing a beehive or even helping a cow give birth to a calf. Each time, he insists that this is the last time he will be helping them. Back in the city, we learn that Ye-jin is pretty well known. She appears in advertisements and is a brand ambassador as well. After her stint with the gloves, she rushes to meet her boyfriend, Isok, but he's miffed that she's late and it's clearly not the first time either. He complains about her constantly being occupied with work and not having a personal life, eventually deciding to break up with her. Ye-jin looks downcast, but during the conversation, she notices that the restaurant's knife would make a pretty good product to sell on their show. Afterwards, she goes back to the office and shows the knife to a colleague, Hwang Ki-hong. She then has dinner with the manager and friend, Sung-mi, and when Sung-mi hears about the breakup, she calls Ye-jin out for never clocking out of work. When Ye-jin goes home, we see that even her house is filled with notes about what products can be sold. She also struggles with sleep and resorts to taking pills. Elsewhere, Matthew gets a call from his brother, Moo-won, who works at a company called Gojinok Bio. Moo-won has gifted him a new tractor, but Matthew is pretty happy with his old one. When Moo-won asks him about that thing, Matthew says he hasn't changed his mind. At work, Ye-jin gets a shock when she realises that her prime time slot has been given over to Yeonji, the top seller of the network who sells beauty products. Yeonji is accompanied by Myung-hwa, whose compact she will be selling on the broadcast. Myung-hwa's presence unsettles Ye-jin, and clearly there is some bad blood between them. Ye-jin storms up to Director Dong's office and asks for an explanation. Dong says that the beauty products bring in much more money and tells Ye-jin to get the French brand L'Etoile on board in order to get her spot back. However, Ye-jin has a clause about never selling beauty products. The scene then shifts to a new character, a man named Eric So, who is the executive director at Etoile and has just arrived from France. He goes for a meeting with Moo-won, asking to renew their contract with Gojinok Bio, which provides raw material for L'Etoile's products. However, Moo-won says their company will not be renewing the contract, and a flashback shows Matthew dumping the contract in the bin. Elsewhere, Ye-jin watches Yeonji's segment on TV. A flashback shows her and Myung-hwa selling cream together, which is soon followed by protests as consumers complain about the product having adverse health issues. The flashback also shows a picture of Myung-hwa with a man holding a baby. Could she be Ye-jin's mother? Ye-jin continues to struggle with her sleep issues after this, and her doctor refuses to give her more pills as she's reached the maximum dose. She arrives late at work and manages to host the segments as usual, but she's exhausted inside. Sung-mi gives her a pep talk and tells her to trust herself. In Dukpung, Matthew picks up a little girl from school who, unlike the other kids, is wearing a mask on her face. Meanwhile, Eric gets excited when he learns that Ye-jin has asked to meet with him to talk about L'Etoile. During the meeting, he seems a bit downhearted when she doesn't immediately recognise him. She gives him her offer to appear on HIT's show, and he agrees to work on one condition. Ye-jin has to help him get the Gojinok Bio on board. She agrees and decides to work on convincing the raw material farmer, Matthew, while he tries to get Moo-won back on board. That night, Ye-jin does her research. She learns that a key ingredient in L'Etoile's products is the WF mushroom. It comes from the white flower nori mushroom, which is native to South Korea. After a whole night of working, she drives to Dukpung village to visit the farm herself. There, her car and Matthew's tractor end up blocking each other's way after she drives down a one-way street. Both of them refuse to move their vehicles behind, leading to a standoff as episode 1 comes to an end. Episode 2 of Sold Out on You begins with a standoff between Yejin and Matthew as their vehicles block each other's path on the narrow street. Yejin gives in and tries reversing, but one of the wheels gets stuck in the soil. She gives up and starts walking into the village, leaving Matthew to figure his own way out. He drives through the narrow space, breaking one of the car's side view mirrors in the process. After a while, Matthew and his tractor follow the same road that Yejin is walking on, and she assumes he's following her and is quite rude to him. That is until she sees the white mushrooms in his tractor. She then introduces herself and asks to speak to the owner, but he locks the door in her face. Matthew then walks through the greenhouse, where quite a few of the townspeople from episode 1 are working. While leaving the greenhouse, Matthew sees Yejin again. She asks for a pair of slippers if nothing else, pointing towards her feet, which have blisters on them from her high heels. He gives her a pair of old and broken slippers, which she reluctantly accepts. Yejin gets back to her car and is shocked to see the broken side view mirror. She calls for car assistance, but they say it will take 3 hours. Since she has a show that evening, she decides to go back to Seoul by bus instead. When Matthew and the others drive past her, she runs after them to ask for a ride. Matthew ignores her, but is forced to stop when Yejin falls down. She hops on and manages to get to the bus terminal, where Yejin and the older women get on the bus, but the driver pulls away very quickly, forcing one of the women to fall. Matthew forces the driver to stop and gives him a piece of his mind, also gaining some respect from Yejin in the process. Elsewhere, Eric's secretary conducts a background check on Yejin. He shows Eric proof of the incident with Yejin and Song Myung-hwa. At HIT, Director Dong and Myung-hwa meet and discuss the actress's return to HIT. Director Dong says it's been 5 years since that incident and that she wants Yejin to bring Letois in. Myung-hwa is upset by this and walks out. A flashback shows Yejin and Myung-hwa selling a product called Good Morning Cream. However, harmful ingredients are soon found in the cream, leading to painful rashes for the consumers. Elsewhere, Yeonji goes to a luxury bag store to look for bags she can sell, but she gets annoyed when she learns that all the good ones have been taken by Yejin. She returns to the office where Director Dong has already put up advertisements of Yejin's collaboration with Letois. Yeonji is frustrated, and Yejin herself says she hasn't agreed to this. Seeing Yejin's hesitation to own the deal, Director Dong reminds her that her colleagues are relying on her. Meanwhile, Eric So gets a package of vinyl records from his sister. He plays one of them, which triggers a memory. A flashback then shows Eric walking in the rain when Yejin suddenly joins him under his umbrella. They walk and talk and then decide to meet at a restaurant the following day. However, Yejin doesn't show up and Eric is left waiting for her. In Dokpung, one of the elders, Mrs. Yang, recognises Yejin on the home shopping show. She makes Matthew help her buy the portable bathtub that Yejin is selling. He uses his own information on the website and ends up winning a prize in HIT's lottery, and he wins an extra bathtub. Yejin arrives back in Dokpung and gives Mrs. Yang her bathtub. Since the buyer's name was listed as Lee Suk, with the middle name hidden, Mrs. Yang gives her an address to deliver the extra bathtub. This leads her to Matthew's house, where Yejin assumes Mr. Lee must be his father. Matthew doesn't explain any further and tells her to leave. Yejin returns to Mrs. Yang's house here, where she learns the older woman works on the mushroom farm, and she asks if she can stay the night. Later, Mrs. Yang mistakenly lets her chickens out of the barn. Yejin chases one all the way up to Matthew's house. When Matthew catches Yejin trying to climb his fence, he gets the police involved. However, she shows him footage of his tractor breaking her side view mirror and he is forced to relent. Instead, they settle on a written agreement in which he promises to pay her for the car repairs if she agrees to never visit his house again. That evening, Moo-won comes to see Matthew. He tries to convince Matthew to use the mushrooms again and forget about that day, but Matthew refuses. He then gets another visit from Yejin at the farm this time. She's in awe of the place despite all his efforts to make her leave. Something about the way he works with mushrooms inspires Yejin, who calls Director Dong and tells her that she will do the Letois launch. That night, Yejin, as usual, is unable to sleep. Meanwhile, Matthew keeps getting texts from Moo-won about trying again. So much so that he ends up changing his phone number online. Despite that, he gets a phone call. The call itself turns out to be from none other than Yejin, who is crying and seems to be trying to reach her mother. So Sold Out on You continues to be a bit slow across these first 2 episodes, and I'm not going to lie, Yejin does come across as a bit annoying. She may be a very diligent worker, but her persistence leans more towards cringe than it does cute. Of course, your mileage may vary with Chae Won-bin's performance here, but on the other hand, Matthew's stubborn refusal to budge is more fun to watch. The story as a whole focuses on these shenanigans and on continuing to establish the characters. We learn more about Eric and his previous connection with Yejin as well, which feels like a meet cute gone wrong. Mrs. Yang is also a sweet addition to the supporting characters on this show and should be protected at all costs. On the other hand, Yejin's decision to work with Latour doesn't have the intended effect. Since she's already struck a deal with Eric, her big realisation on the mushroom farm doesn't really strike the right note. It's also not clear why watching Matthew working with the mushrooms has this effect on her. Maybe there's something in her past that suggests why? The key mystery of the show remains compelling though, no doubt, because both Matthew and Yejin have traumatic incidents in their past, and while we know a little about Yejin's, we know next to nothing about Matthew's. It definitely has something to do with Latour, but the crux of the matter is well within wraps, which is a good way to make us want to keep watching. Just like that cliffhanger, there's an obvious cross connection, which offers a nice way to force the leads to talk to each other again. Hopefully we'll find out more next week. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.